A dangerous question about freedom. Have you ever sat alone late at night, headphones on, replaying the same simple English sentence again and again, and suddenly wondered not about the language, but about your life? Not about grammar, not about pronunciation, but about why learning English feels so heavy, so exhausting, as if every word is dragging an invisible chain behind it. This video is not really about English. It is about a question that followed me across the ocean, across climate zones, across marriage, fear, and silence. Why do Americans love independence so much, and are you brave enough to be free? 8 weeks ago, when I arrived in the United States, I thought my biggest challenge would be English. I imagined myself struggling with fast speech, unfamiliar accents, and awkward small talk. I prepared vocabulary lists. I downloaded apps. I told myself, just survive the language, everything else will be fine. But the first thing America taught me was not a new word. It was a feeling. A strange, quiet feeling of standing on my own, even when I was surrounded by people. The air felt different. Not just colder or drier depending on the region, but emotionally different. In many places I had lived before, people checked on each other constantly. They asked personal questions. They offered advice even when you did not ask. Here, people smiled, said hi, how are you, and kept walking. At first, it felt cold. Then it felt confusing. And slowly, it started to feel honest. I remember one morning clearly. I was standing in line at a coffee shop. The barista spoke quickly, but kindly. I understood only part of what she said. My brain panicked. Old fear rose up, the fear every English learner knows. I am not good enough. I will embarrass myself. But something unexpected happened. No one rushed me. No one corrected me impatiently. I took a breath and said, slowly, sorry, can you say it again, please? She nodded. She repeated it. That was it. No drama. No judgment. Just space. That space is everywhere in America. Space to try. Space to fail. Space to be responsible for yourself. Psychologists say the human brain learns best when it feels safe, not when it feels pressured. When you are anxious, your brain goes into survival mode. It blocks new information. This is why so many people study English for years and still feel stuck. They are not lazy. Their brains are scared. I realized something important during my first days here. Independence creates safety. When no one is constantly watching, correcting, or judging, your nervous system relaxes. And when it relaxes, learning begins. This idea of independence does not mean loneliness. It means ownership. In America, people expect you to own your choices, your time, your emotions. At first, this was uncomfortable for me, especially in my marriage. Back home, love often meant sacrifice without boundaries. It meant staying silent to keep peace. Here, I saw couples who respected each other's personal space. They did not merge into one person. They stood side by side. One evening, after a long day of misunderstanding English signs, weather forecasts, and even jokes, I told my partner, I feel stupid today. Instead of fixing me, instead of giving advice, they said, that feeling is yours. But you don't have to carry it alone. That sentence stayed with me. It was simple English. Very simple. But the meaning was deep. Independence does not remove connection. It strengthens it. Many English learners think fluency will give them confidence. But confidence often comes first. In the US, I saw people speak imperfect English without apology. Immigrants ordering food, parents talking to teachers, workers asking questions. Their grammar was not perfect. Their courage was. Freedom here is not about speaking flawlessly. It is about daring to show up as you are. If you listen carefully, you will notice how often Americans use simple words, short sentences, clear intentions. I need help. I'm not available. I don't understand. These are not advanced phrases. But they are powerful. They require honesty. And honesty requires freedom, from fear of judgment, from fear of being seen as weak. Climate also plays a quiet role. In colder regions, people plan ahead. They prepare. They respect systems because weather demands it. This shapes a mindset of responsibility. You cannot blame the snow. You adapt. The same applies to language learning here. No one will chase you to practice English. No one will remind you every day. Freedom means the responsibility is yours. During those first weeks, I stopped asking, why is English so hard, and started asking, why am I afraid to be independent in my learning? That question changed everything. I began to practice English in small, real moments. One sentence at a time. One interaction at a time. No pressure to be perfect. Just permission to be present. If you are listening to this and feeling tired, discouraged, or ashamed of your English, I want you to hear this clearly. Your problem is not language. It is permission. Permission to go slow. Permission to sound imperfect. Permission to learn through life, not textbooks. Americans love independence because it gives them this permission early in life. You can give it to yourself now. So here is the dangerous question I promised you at the beginning. Dangerous, because it changes things once you answer it honestly. Are you brave enough to be free, not fluent, not perfect, but free enough to try? 8 weeks that changed me. 8 weeks is not a long time. It is shorter than a season, shorter than most online English courses, shorter than the promises we make to ourselves every new year. Yet somehow, these 8 weeks in the United States quietly rearranged the way I think about learning English, about marriage, and about what freedom actually feels like when it is no longer just a word in a textbook. When I landed in America, I told myself a familiar lie. I will observe first. I will speak later. This is a lie many English learners live with for years. We hide behind listening. We convince ourselves that silence is preparation. In reality, silence is often fear wearing a polite mask. During my first week, I barely spoke unless I had to. I listened to conversations around me like background music, interesting, but distant. English was everywhere, but it did not belong to me yet. The days moved slowly. Mornings were quiet. Afternoons felt long. Evenings were colder than I expected. Climate does that to you. In some parts of the US, the air feels sharp, especially in the early hours. It wakes you up. It forces you to be present. You cannot rush through the day half asleep. That physical alertness mirrored something emotional happening inside me. I was awake, but unsure what to do with that. Awareness. One afternoon, about 10 days in, I walked alone through a residential neighborhood. No crowds. No noise. Just houses, trees, and wide sidewalks. I realized something unsettling. No one was watching me. No one cared where I was going, what I was doing, or how well I spoke English. For the first time, my excuses felt thin. If I did not practice, it was not because of pressure. It was because of choice. Psychology calls this self-determination. Humans feel more motivated when they believe their actions are freely chosen, not forced. In many education systems, language learning is driven by fear, tests, deadlines, judgment. Here, learning floated in open space. That space was uncomfortable at first. Freedom often is. Without pressure, you meet yourself. Honestly. In the second week, my marriage entered that same open space. Without familiar routines, without extended family, without constant social noise, small misunderstandings became louder. We had more silence, and silence, like freedom, reveals things. One night, after struggling to understand a phone call in English about a simple appointment, I snapped. Not at the language, but at myself. I felt weak, dependent, tired. Instead of arguing, we sat quietly. Then my partner said something very simple: "We are both learning how to live here." That sentence mattered. Not you. Not me, but we. Independence does not erase partnership. It reshapes it. In America, I noticed couples often handle stress side by side, not by absorbing each other's emotions. Each person owns their feelings, then chooses to share them. That balance felt new and healthy. By week 3, something shifted. I stopped waiting to feel ready. I started speaking English in fragments. Short sentences. Sometimes wrong ones. I'm not sure. Can you explain again? I'm learning. These are not advanced phrases, but they open doors. Research in language acquisition shows that frequent low-stakes interaction builds fluency faster than silent study. The brain learns patterns through use, not perfection. Daily life became my classroom. Weather forecasts taught me new vocabulary. Grocery stores trained my listening skills. Small talk, that mysterious American ritual, became less frightening. Nice weather today. Long day, huh? These exchanges are short, but they carry social warmth. They say, "I see you." And slowly, I started seeing myself differently, not as an outsider learning English, but as a person participating in life through English. Week 5 was the hardest. The excitement faded. Fatigue settled in. This is where many learners quit. Motivation dips after novelty disappears. Neuroscience explains this as dopamine adjustment. Your brain no longer rewards newness. Only meaning keeps you going. That week, I wanted comfort. Familiar language. Familiar habits. But comfort would have taken me backward. Instead, I leaned into routine. 10 minutes of speaking out loud each morning. Reading signs. Repeating simple sentences. Not to sound fluent, but to feel present. Consistency, not intensity, rebuilt my confidence. This is something most people underestimate. Small daily actions reshape identity over time. By week 7, English stopped feeling like a wall. It felt like a bridge under construction. Unfinished. Sometimes shaky, but usable. I laughed at mistakes instead of apologizing for them. I noticed how Americans respond to confidence more than correctness. If you speak calmly, people listen. If you panic, they panic with you. Now, at the end of 8 weeks, I see the real change was never about vocabulary. It was about courage. The courage to stand alone in a quiet neighborhood. The courage to speak before feeling ready. The courage to let marriage evolve instead of controlling it. Americans love independence not because they reject connection, but because independence teaches responsibility, for learning, for love, for life. If you are listening to this while doubting yourself, remember this. Progress does not announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers through ordinary days. 8 weeks can change you, not by force, but by freedom. America felt cold at first. The first thing I learned about America was not a word. It was a temperature. Cold does not always arrive as snow or wind. Sometimes it arrives as silence. In my early days here, that silence felt sharp. Streets were wide. Houses stood apart. People moved with purpose, not curiosity. No one asked where I was from. No one asked why I was here. For someone used to warm questions and constant attention, this felt like emotional winter. Climate shapes behavior more than we realize. In colder regions of the United States, people learn early to respect distance. They plan. They prepare. They do not rely on others to rescue them from discomfort. Winter teaches responsibility. If you forget your jacket, no one will scold you. You will simply be cold. That lesson repeats quietly every day, and it builds a mindset. Take care of yourself first. At first, I misunderstood this as indifference. I remember walking into a small store, struggling to understand the cashier's fast English. My heart raced. In many places, someone might slow down immediately, maybe even speak for you. Here, the cashier waited. Calmly. Patiently. That pause felt uncomfortable. But it was not unkind. It was respectful. She trusted me to find my words. This is something many English learners are not used to. We are used to being helped too quickly or corrected too loudly. Our brains associate learning with pressure. But neuroscience tells us something important. The brain learns best when it feels autonomy. When you are allowed to struggle without being judged, neural connections strengthen. That pause at the counter was not coldness. It was space for growth. Weather also affects daily rhythm. Mornings here start early. People check forecasts seriously. Conversations include phrases like, "It's going to drop below freezing tonight," or "The storm's coming in fast." These are simple sentences, repeated often. Listening to them every day trained my ear naturally. No textbook could compete with that repetition. Real life has its own curriculum. Emotionally, though, the cold hit harder in my marriage. Without the distraction of social gatherings or familiar routines, we spent more time in quiet rooms. Silence magnifies thoughts. Small disagreements felt bigger. I noticed how often I wanted comfort. Words in my native language. English felt too sharp for feelings. Too direct. Too exposed. One evening, after a particularly cold day, I said softly, "I feel alone here." My partner did not rush to fix that feeling. Instead, they said, "So do I sometimes." That honesty changed the room. In American culture, admitting vulnerability without drama is common. People do not wrap emotions in poetry. They name them. Clear language creates emotional clarity. This clarity is part of why Americans value independence. When emotions are named, boundaries become visible. You know where you end and another person begins. That separation does not weaken love. It protects it. Studies in relationship psychology show that couples who maintain individual identity experience less resentment over time. Independence reduces emotional overload. As weeks passed, I started noticing warmth hidden beneath the cold. Neighbors who waved without stopping. Strangers who held doors without conversation. A quiet kindness that did not demand recognition. Warmth here is practical, not performative. It does not ask for gratitude. It simply exists. Language learning followed the same pattern. At first, English felt cold. Short sentences. Direct tone. No decorative words. But that simplicity became comforting. I need help. I'm not ready. Can we try again? These sentences are like winter clothing, functional, reliable, protective. They keep you moving. There is also a scientific reason cold environments can sharpen focus. Cold exposure increases alertness by activating the nervous system. You become more present. More aware. I noticed that on colder days, my listening improved. My brain stayed awake. Discomfort, in small doses, can enhance learning. By the end of my first month, I no longer feared the cold. I respected it. I dressed better. I planned ahead. I spoke more clearly. I stopped waiting for warmth to come from others and started creating it through action. A greeting. A question. A simple English sentence spoken with calm confidence. If you are learning English and feel that people are distant, consider this perspective. They may be giving you room to stand on your own. That space is not rejection. It is trust. Trust that you can handle discomfort. Trust that you can find your voice. America felt cold at first, because it did not wrap me in reassurance. It handed me responsibility instead. And slowly, that responsibility became freedom. Freedom to speak imperfectly. Freedom to learn through living. Freedom to warm myself from the inside out. Why Americans stand alone so well. There is a moment that arrives quietly when you live in America long enough. It is the moment you realize people here are not trying to be strong in front of others. They are simply used to standing alone. Not in a lonely way, but in a practiced way, like someone who knows how to balance without holding a wall. When I noticed this, my understanding of independence shifted from theory to daily life. In my 4th week, I started paying attention to small routines. People pumping gas alone at night. Elderly neighbors carrying groceries without asking for help. Teenagers taking buses by themselves, headphones on, eyes calm. No one looked heroic. No one looked dramatic. Independence here is quiet. It does not announce itself. It repeats. This repetition matters. Behavioral psychology shows that identity is built through repeated actions, not big decisions. Americans learn independence not through speeches, but through daily responsibility. You show up on time, because no one will remind you. You speak up, because silence will not protect you. You fix small problems, because waiting costs more. 1 morning, I missed a bus, because I misunderstood the schedule. The sign was in simple English. I had read it, but not carefully. My first instinct was to blame the language. But standing there alone, watching the bus disappear, I felt something different. Ownership. No one else was responsible. That realization was uncomfortable, but strangely empowering. I read the sign again. Slowly. Out loud. Weekdays. Weekends. That lesson stayed with me longer than any grammar rule. Language learning thrives on this kind of consequence. When mistakes matter, but do not punish, you learn faster. In America, social systems are built this way. You are allowed to fail safely. Miss the bus, not your future. Say the wrong word, not lose your dignity. This balance is rare and powerful. Independence also shows up in communication. Americans often say what they mean without decoration. I can't today. I need time. That doesn't work for me. For many learners, this feels rude at first. But linguistically, it is efficient. Emotionally, it is honest. Clear language reduces misunderstanding. Studies show that direct communication lowers stress, because the brain does not have to guess hidden meanings. In my marriage, this clarity changed how we handled tension. Instead of guessing moods, we named them. I'm overwhelmed. I need quiet. These sentences are simple, but they prevent resentment. Independence inside a relationship means you manage your emotions before handing them to someone else. Love becomes a choice, not a burden. I noticed this pattern everywhere. Parents letting children solve small problems on their own. Teachers encouraging questions instead of giving answers. Co-workers respecting boundaries without explanation. Independence here is not about pride. It is about trust. Trust that each person can handle their part of life. For English learners, this environment is both challenging and liberating. No one will chase you to practice. No one will translate for you forever. But no one will shame you either. You are free to build your skills at your pace. That freedom demands discipline. Discipline grows from meaning, not fear. Neuroscience supports this. When learning is self-directed, the brain releases dopamine linked to motivation. You feel ownership over progress. That ownership creates resilience. Instead of quitting when it gets hard, you adjust. You try again. You stand alone and stronger. I tested this deliberately. One day, I decided not to rely on my partner for English help. I ordered food alone. I asked for directions alone. I made mistakes alone. Each interaction was short. Each success was small. But together, they formed confidence. Confidence is not loud. It is cumulative. By the end of that week, I realized something important. Americans do not stand alone because they reject others. They stand alone because they were taught early that dependence without choice becomes weakness. Independence creates healthier connections because it removes silent expectations. If you are learning English, ask yourself this gently. Are you waiting to feel ready, or are you practicing standing alone? You do not need perfect grammar to be independent. You need willingness. Willingness to speak. To listen. To adjust. Standing alone does not mean standing forever. It means knowing you can. And when you know that, asking for help becomes a choice, not a need. That is freedom. Independence inside marriage. There is a quiet myth many of us grow up believing, that love means never standing alone. That if two people truly care for each other, they should think the same, feel the same, struggle together in the same way. When I came to America, this belief followed me like an old habit. And slowly, gently, it began to fall apart. During my 5th week here, I noticed something subtle, but unsettling. Couples around me did not lean on each other the way I expected. They walked side by side, not intertwined. They made decisions together, but not for each other. At first, this felt distant. Almost cold. I wondered, is this what independence does to love? The answer came not through theory, but through tension. One evening, after a long day of navigating English conversations, signs, and misunderstandings, I felt exhausted. My brain was tired from translating. My emotions were tired from adjusting. I wanted comfort. Familiar words. Reassurance. Instead of asking directly, I stayed quiet. I waited. This is something many of us do in relationships. We wait to be noticed. Nothing happened. In that silence, frustration grew. Not because my partner didn't care, but because I hadn't taken responsibility for my own emotional needs. In American culture, independence inside marriage means something very specific. You speak before you resent. You ask before you withdraw. So I said, slowly, choosing simple English words, I feel overwhelmed today. I need support. The sentence was not poetic. It was not perfect. But it was honest. And honesty changes the atmosphere of a room faster than love ever could. Psychologists call this emotional ownership. When you name your feelings clearly, you reduce emotional guessing. Guessing is exhausting. It creates anxiety. Clear communication, even in basic English, lowers stress hormones and builds trust. This is one reason American relationships often emphasize direct language. Not because people are cold, but because clarity is kind. Independence inside marriage does not mean emotional distance. It means emotional responsibility. Each person manages their internal world before asking someone else to enter it. This was new for me. I was used to merging emotions, sharing confusion without structure, hoping the other person would fix it. In the US, I learned that love works better when it is invited, not demanded. This realization changed how I approached English learning as well. I stopped blaming my partner when I felt stuck. I stopped expecting encouragement to appear magically. Instead, I said things like, "I want to practice speaking today." Or, "Can you listen for 5 minutes?" Clear requests. Clear boundaries. Simple English. Real results. Neuroscience explains why this works. The brain responds better to specific goals than vague desires. Help me is emotionally heavy. Listen for 5 minutes is actionable. Independence sharpens communication. It turns feelings into plans. I also noticed how American couples protect personal space. Time alone is not seen as rejection. It is maintenance. One afternoon, my partner went out alone. Old fears whispered, "Are we drifting apart?" But later that evening, the connection felt lighter. Absence, when chosen, strengthens presence. This applies to language learning too. Time alone with English, reading signs, thinking in short sentences, repeating phrases out loud, built confidence. I did not need constant feedback. I needed consistency. Independence trains patience. There is also a cultural layer here. American society values individual identity strongly. Marriage does not erase that identity. Instead, it requires negotiation. Two independent systems learning to cooperate. That cooperation is stronger because neither side collapses without the other. Studies on long-term relationships show that couples who maintain personal autonomy experience less burnout. They argue less about small things. They respect boundaries. Independence reduces emotional overload. Love becomes sustainable. By the end of week 5, something shifted in me. I stopped equating independence with distance. I saw it as structure. Like the frame of a house. Without it, everything leans too heavily on everything else. If you are learning English through stories like this, notice how simple the language can be when emotions are clear. I need space. I need help. I'm learning. These sentences carry strength. They do not apologize for existing. Many learners hesitate to speak English in emotional moments because they fear sounding childish. But simplicity is not weakness. It is precision. Children speak simply because they are honest. Adults complicate language to hide uncertainty. Independence inside marriage taught me this. When you take responsibility for your feelings, your words become lighter. And when your words are lighter, English stops feeling like a burden. Love did not disappear when I stood alone emotionally. It deepened. It became a choice, not a reflex. Americans value this kind of independence because it protects connection instead of consuming it. So if you are listening and thinking about your own relationships, romantic or otherwise, ask yourself gently, where can you stand a little more on your own? Not to leave, but to stay stronger. Freedom inside love is not about walking away. It is about standing upright. English was not the problem. For a long time, I believed English was my obstacle. Every frustration, every awkward silence, every moment of hesitation, I blamed the language. I told myself, if my English were better, life here would be easier. That belief followed me into my 6th week in America. And then, quietly, it collapsed. It happened on an ordinary day. No breakthrough conversation. No dramatic failure. Just a moment of clarity that arrived while I was doing something simple, listening to a voicemail. The message was short, clear, slow. I understood every word. And yet, I still felt nervous calling back. That fear surprised me. If English was no longer the barrier, what was? The answer was uncomfortable, hesitation. Psychologists describe hesitation as a protective reflex. The brain delays action to avoid potential embarrassment or rejection. For language learners, this reflex becomes a habit. We wait. We rehearse. We replay sentences in our heads. By the time we feel ready, the moment has passed. English was never blocking me. My fear of acting imperfectly was. This realization hit hard because it meant responsibility shifted back to me. I could no longer hide behind vocabulary lists or grammar excuses. I had to face the real issue. Confidence does not come from mastery. It comes from movement. In America, I noticed how people treat communication as functional, not performative. They speak to exchange information, not to impress. If a sentence works, it works. No apology required. Watching this changed how I judged myself. I started asking a different question. Not is my English good? But did my message land? This shift matters deeply for learners. Linguists explain that communication success depends more on clarity than correctness. A simple sentence delivered calmly is more effective than a complex one delivered with anxiety. The brain of the listener fills in gaps. Humans are cooperative communicators by nature. During week 6, I tested this idea intentionally. I stopped over-preparing. I spoke when the thought appeared, not when it felt polished. I said things like, I'm not sure, but I think, or let me try to explain. These phrases became bridges. They bought me time. They signaled honesty. And people responded warmly. I also noticed how Americans react to effort. When they see you trying, they lean in. They slow down. They help, not because you are weak, but because communication is shared work. This changed how I felt emotionally. English stopped being a test. It became a tool. The same lesson applied to my marriage. I realized how often I delayed expressing needs, because I wanted to say them perfectly. In my native language, I could decorate emotions. In English, I felt exposed. But exposure turned out to be strength. When I spoke simply, I'm tired, I need quiet, I'm worried the message was clearer than ever before. Neuroscience explains why this feels powerful. Clear expression reduces cognitive load. When your brain is not juggling rehearsed sentences, it can focus on connection. This lowers stress and builds trust. Independence plays a role here. When you trust yourself to handle mistakes, you speak more freely. Another truth emerged that week. Many people who say they can't speak English actually understand much more than they admit. Comprehension develops before production. This is normal. Children understand long before they speak. Adults forget this and judge themselves harshly. In America, I saw adults learning new skills openly. No shame. Just practice. I stopped saying, "My English is bad." I started saying, "I'm practicing." That small language shift changed my identity. Words shape self-perception. When you label yourself as incapable, your brain believes it. When you label yourself as learning, your brain stays flexible. There is scientific evidence behind this. A growth mindset, believing abilities can improve, activates neural pathways associated with learning. A fixed mindset shuts them down. Independence supports growth, because it places control back in your hands. By the end of week 6, I no longer feared speaking imperfect English. I feared staying silent. Silence felt heavier than mistakes. Silence meant missed connections, missed learning, missed life. If you are listening to this and still blaming English, pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, is the language truly stopping you, or is it hesitation disguised as caution? The answer may surprise you. English was not my problem. Waiting was. Once I stopped waiting to be ready, learning accelerated naturally. Confidence followed action, not the other way around. Freedom in America taught me this lesson gently but firmly. You do not earn the right to speak by being perfect. You claim it by participating. Learning English through real life. There was a quiet morning during my 7th week in America, when I realized something had changed. I was walking outside, listening to the sound of traffic, the wind brushing past trees, a neighbor saying, "Good morning," without slowing down. And suddenly, English was no longer loud in my head. It was just there. Like background music you don't consciously notice until it stops. This is when I understood the difference between studying English and living in English. For years, I treated English like a subject that required full attention. Sit down. Focus hard. Memorize. Repeat. But real life does not wait for perfect conditions. In America, English flows through ordinary moments. It does not announce itself as a lesson. It hides inside weather apps, grocery aisles, voicemail messages, and small talk you almost ignore. During week 7, I stopped forcing study time. Instead, I started noticing language. Not analyzing it. Just noticing. The brain loves patterns, and patterns appear when you stop trying to control them. Cognitive science explains this well. When learning is tied to emotion and context, memory strengthens. The brain stores language more effectively when it connects words to lived experience. That is why you remember a sentence said during a meaningful moment more than a sentence from a textbook. One afternoon, I needed to return an item at a store. Simple task. Simple English. Or so I thought. My heart still raced. But this time, I didn't rehearse. I walked in and said, I want to return this. I have the receipt. The employee nodded. Asked a question. I answered with a short sentence. Transaction complete. No drama. No applause. Just life continuing. That moment mattered, because it rewired something in me. English was no longer a performance. It was a tool. Tools are meant to be used, not admired. At home, the same shift happened emotionally. My partner and I talked less about English and more through English. Not long conversations. Just practical ones. Dinner at 6. I'll be late. Can you help me with this? Form. These sentences carried weight, because they moved life forward. In American culture, efficiency is often misunderstood as coldness. But efficiency reduces emotional friction. When language is clear, energy remains for connection. I felt this in my marriage. Less explaining. Less guessing. More presence. I also noticed how Americans repeat language naturally. The same phrases appear again and again. Take care. Let me know. Sounds good. Repetition without pressure is powerful. Linguists call this input frequency. The more often your brain hears a phrase in meaningful contexts, the faster it becomes automatic. By week 7, phrases I once struggled with started appearing in my own speech without effort. That is when you know learning is happening. Not when you can explain a rule, but when you forget you ever learned it. Another important change was how I listened. I stopped trying to understand every word. I listened for meaning, tone, intention. This is how native speakers listen. Understanding does not come from catching everything. It comes from catching enough. Neuroscience shows that the brain fills gaps using context. When you relax, comprehension improves. Anxiety blocks this process. Living in English reduced anxiety, because mistakes were no longer hypothetical. They were normal, frequent, harmless. One evening, while watching the news, I realized I was no longer translating. I was reacting. I felt surprised, curious, concerned. Those emotions came first. Words followed. That reversal mattered. Language had moved from the front of my mind to the background. This shift also changed my motivation. I no longer asked, how can I improve my English? I asked, what do I need to do today? English followed naturally. Purpose pulled language along with it. For learners watching this video, this is the part many people miss. You don't need more pressure. You need more life. More small tasks. More ordinary interactions. More permission to sound human. Living in America taught me that independence creates opportunities for natural learning. No one structures your day. No one assigns homework. But every moment offers practice if you are present. By the end of week 7, I felt lighter. Not fluent. Not perfect. But connected. English no longer stood between me and life. It walked with me through it. If you are stuck, tired, or discouraged, try this experiment. Stop studying for one day. Just live. Listen. Speak when needed. Notice language instead of chasing it. Let English find you where you already are. Because real progress does not arrive loudly. It slips in quietly, during moments you stop trying so hard. Love tested by freedom. There is a point in every journey when growth stops being gentle. It presses back. It asks questions you did not plan to answer. For me, that moment arrived in my 8th week in America, not through language, not through weather, but through love. Freedom, I learned, does not only test individuals. It tests relationships. By this time, English no longer frightened me the way it once had. I could function. I could speak. I could understand enough. And that confidence, surprisingly, created tension. When one person changes, the relationship must adjust. Independence shifts balance. Balance resists change. One evening, after a long day apart, we sat across from each other in silence. Not the comfortable silence of rest, but the uncertain kind. The kind that asks, who are we becoming now? I realized something uncomfortable. I was growing faster than I expected. Not away from my partner, but into myself. In many cultures, love means constant closeness. Shared routines. Shared struggles. Shared identity. But in America, love often means supporting change, even when that change introduces distance. Freedom does not promise comfort. It promises honesty. That night, I said something I had never said before. In simple English, because that was all I had. I feel stronger here. And that scares me. The words hung in the air. Vulnerability feels riskier than weakness. Weakness asks for help. Vulnerability asks to be seen. My partner listened. Then said, I'm proud of you. I'm just adjusting. That sentence mattered. It acknowledged both support and uncertainty. Real love holds both. Relationship researchers explain this moment as differentiation. Healthy couples allow each partner to develop independently while staying emotionally connected. When differentiation is low, growth feels like threat. When it is high, growth feels shared. Freedom accelerates differentiation. In America, systems encourage self-reliance. That self-reliance does not disappear at home. It walks through the door with you. It changes how you speak, how you decide, how you ask for space. English played an unexpected role in this test. Speaking a second language strips away emotional excess. You choose words carefully. You slow down. That slowness reduces emotional escalation. Arguments become conversations. Feelings become statements. Instead of saying everything at once, I said, I need time to think. Instead of defending, my partner said, I hear you. These phrases are small. But they create safety. Safety allows freedom to exist without breaking connection. Neuroscience tells us that emotional safety calms the amygdala, the brain's fear center. When fear is low, empathy rises. That is why simple, clear language can save relationships under stress. Complexity fuels misunderstanding. Simplicity restores balance. Freedom also tested expectations. I no longer waited for permission to practice English, to explore, to try new routines. I moved. And movement requires trust. Trust that love will stretch instead of snap. 1 afternoon, I went out alone for hours. When I returned, instead of guilt, I felt gratitude. Time apart sharpened appreciation. Independence made togetherness intentional. Chosen. Not assumed. This lesson mirrored language learning. When English was forced, I resisted. When it was chosen, I leaned in. The brain responds to autonomy. So does the heart. By the end of week 8, I understood why Americans defend independence so fiercely. It is not because they fear intimacy. It is because they respect growth. Growth requires room. Love without room becomes fragile. If you are listening and navigating your own relationships while learning English, remember this: progress will change you. That change may challenge people around you. Communicate it. Name it. Don't hide it. Use simple words. Honest words. I'm learning. I'm changing. I still care. These sentences protect love while allowing freedom. Love tested by freedom can survive. In fact, it can deepen. But only if both people allow growth to exist without panic. Freedom did not pull us apart. It taught us how to stand stronger, together, but not entangled. American families raise brave minds. There is a small moment that stayed with me long after it passed. I was sitting in a park, watching families come and go. Children ran freely. Sometimes too freely. They climbed. They fell. They argued. Parents watched from a distance, not careless, not absent, but calm. That calm carried a message I had not fully understood before. Bravery is trained, not demanded. In America, families do not raise perfect children. They raise capable ones. During my 9th week, this idea slowly connected everything I had experienced so far: language learning, independence, marriage, even my own fear of making mistakes. I realized that the American love for independence begins very early, long before adulthood. It begins at home. I watched a small boy struggle to zip his jacket. His hands shook with effort. The zipper slipped again and again. The mother stood nearby. She did not rush in. She did not correct him. She waited. Finally, after one last try, the zipper closed. The boy smiled. Pride lit up his face. That pride was earned. Psychologists call this self-efficacy, the belief that you can handle challenges on your own. Self-efficacy predicts resilience, motivation, and long-term success better than intelligence. American families cultivate this belief daily, through patience, not pressure. I thought about my own English learning journey. How often did I rush myself? How often did I expect fluency before effort? Watching that child struggle reminded me that struggle is not failure. It is training. Language learning works the same way. When someone answers for you too quickly, your brain misses the chance to build confidence. When someone waits, calmly, you learn that effort matters more than speed. That pause is a gift. I noticed how American parents speak to their children. Simple sentences. Clear instructions. Respectful tone. Try again. You've got this. Take your time. These phrases are powerful because they focus on process, not outcome. They teach children to trust themselves. These same phrases work for adults learning English. Especially adults who feel embarrassed starting over. At home, I saw how this mindset affected family dynamics. Children were encouraged to speak up, to ask questions, to express disagreement respectfully. Silence was not rewarded. Participation was. This creates adults who are not afraid to speak, even when their words are imperfect. That realization hit close to home. Many English learners grow up in environments where mistakes are punished, where speaking up risks embarrassment. Over time, silence feels safer than effort. America challenges this conditioning. I saw it again at a family gathering. A child interrupted an adult conversation with a question. No scolding. No shame. The adult paused, answered briefly, then continued. The child learned something important. Your voice matters, but so does timing. Both lessons delivered gently. Neuroscience supports this approach. When learning environments feel safe, the brain's fear response lowers. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning and language, activates more easily. Fear blocks learning. Safety invites it. This is why many immigrants eventually become confident speakers, not because their grammar improves magically, but because their environment stops punishing mistakes. American families normalize effort. They normalize trying. I reflected on how this applied to my own marriage. Independence inside family life does not mean emotional distance. It means allowing each person, including children, to face challenges appropriate to their level. Not rescuing too early. Not controlling outcomes. That balance is difficult. It requires trust. Trust that discomfort leads somewhere useful. During that week, I started treating my own English learning like a parent treats a child learning to zip a jacket. I stopped rushing. I stopped criticizing. I waited. I tried again. I smiled at small wins. I spoke English slowly on purpose. I allowed pauses. I corrected myself without apology. And something unexpected happened. People waited with me. They did not rush. They did not judge. They mirrored the calm I brought into the conversation. Confidence invites patience. American families raise brave minds not by telling children to be brave, but by letting them experience manageable fear and survive it. That survival builds identity. I can handle this. This is the same identity every English learner needs. If you are watching this and thinking about your own family, your own children, or your own inner child, consider this. Independence begins when someone believes they are allowed to try without being perfect. You don't need louder motivation. You need a safer environment. One where mistakes are part of the process, not evidence of failure. America taught me that bravery grows quietly at home, in ordinary moments, under patient eyes. And when that bravery matures, it shows up everywhere, in language, in love, in life. The week I almost gave up. There is always a week like this. It does not arrive with warning. It does not announce itself as a crisis. It feels ordinary at first, just a little heavier, a little quieter, a little more tiring than usual. For me, that week arrived right after everything seemed to be working. My English was improving. Life felt stable. And that was exactly when doubt slipped in. This was the week I almost gave up. Not dramatically. Not in tears. Just in small thoughts that sounded reasonable. Maybe I'm tired. Maybe this pace isn't sustainable. Maybe I should pause for a while. These thoughts are dangerous because they wear the mask of self-care. But underneath, they often hide fear. The week began with exhaustion. Mental exhaustion. When you live in a second language, your brain works overtime. Every sign, every conversation, every decision requires translation, not just of words, but of culture. Cognitive scientists call this decision fatigue. When the brain is overloaded, motivation drops. Everything feels harder than it should. One morning, I woke up and felt resistance. Not to English specifically, but to effort itself. I delayed simple tasks. I avoided conversations. I stayed quiet longer than necessary. Silence returned, not as fear, but as avoidance. That was new. And it scared me more than my early mistakes ever had. In my marriage, I became distant. Not intentionally. Just tired. When your energy drops, communication is the first thing to suffer. I answered with short phrases. I stopped sharing thoughts. Independence, when fueled by exhaustion, can turn into isolation. That night, I sat alone and asked myself a difficult question. What am I protecting right now? The answer was uncomfortable. I was protecting my progress. I was afraid that if I kept pushing, I might fail again. And failing after progress feels worse than failing at the beginning. Psychology explains this well. When people experience improvement, their fear of regression increases. This fear can cause self-sabotage. You slow down to avoid the pain of falling. But learning does not work that way. Stopping feels safe, but it freezes growth. English became the symbol of that fear. Not because it was difficult, but because it exposed effort. Speaking meant risking imperfection again. And my tired brain wanted certainty, not risk. The turning point came in a small moment. I was asked a simple question in English. I understood it perfectly. But instead of answering, I hesitated. That hesitation lasted maybe 2 seconds. But it felt heavy. Familiar. It felt like the old me. I answered anyway. Simply. Imperfectly. And the world did not collapse. That moment reminded me of something important. Courage does not disappear suddenly. It erodes quietly when you stop using it. Neuroscience tells us that habits weaken when not reinforced. Confidence is a habit. So is silence. The brain chooses the path that feels easiest in the moment, not the one that serves you long term. When you are tired, ease wins unless you intervene consciously. That night, I spoke honestly to my partner. In simple English. This week feels heavy. I'm not quitting. I'm just tired. Naming the feeling changed it. Emotional clarity reduces internal pressure. The brain relaxes when emotions are labeled. This is called affect labeling, and it is proven to reduce stress responses. Instead of advice, I received understanding. Understanding without rescue. That mattered. Independence does not mean facing difficulty alone. It means choosing support without surrendering responsibility. The next day, I did something small but intentional. I spoke English when it was easier not to. One sentence. Then another. Not to improve. Not to prove anything. Just to stay in motion. Movement is medicine during low weeks. Not intensity. Not motivation speeches. Just movement. By the end of that week, energy slowly returned. Not because problems disappeared, but because I had stayed present through discomfort. I did not give up. I did not dramatically push through either. I stayed honest. This week taught me something essential about freedom. Freedom is not constant excitement. It is commitment without guarantees. Americans value independence because it trains endurance. You learn to keep going even when motivation fades. If you are watching this and feeling tired, stuck, or quietly discouraged, know this. A low week does not erase your progress. It reveals your patterns. And patterns can be adjusted. Do not judge yourself for wanting to stop. Ask instead what you need to continue gently. English learning is not a straight line. Neither is growth. Neither is love. The week I almost gave up became the week I learned how to stay. Choosing freedom again. By the time the 11th week arrived, something inside me had changed. Not loudly. Not in a way that others could immediately see. But quietly. Deeply, like a muscle that had been used enough times to remember its strength. This was not the week of victory. It was the week of choice. Freedom is not something you earn once. It is something you choose again and again, especially after doubt, after fatigue, after the temptation to return to comfort. And this week, I understood that independence is not a destination in America. It is a daily decision. I noticed it first in my mornings. Before, my days began with urgency. What should I fix? What should I improve? What English skill am I missing? But now, mornings felt slower. I woke up without panic. I no longer asked how to sound perfect. I asked how to stay present. Presence is a form of freedom many people overlook. When you live in a foreign country, especially one like the United States that values self-direction, you quickly realize something important. No one is coming to manage your life for you. That sounds frightening at first. But over time, it becomes empowering. Responsibility stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like ownership. This week, I owned my pace. I did not force English into every moment. I did not hide from it either. I let it live naturally in conversations, mistakes, silences, and small wins. Linguists call this implicit learning, acquiring language through lived experience rather than constant correction. It is slower on the surface, but deeper in impact. One afternoon, I had a conversation that would have scared me weeks ago. Not because of complex vocabulary, but because it required honesty. I needed to explain a personal boundary. In another language. In another culture. I spoke slowly. I paused. I searched for words. And I did not apologize for that. For the first time, I felt something new while speaking English, dignity. Dignity does not come from fluency. It comes from self-respect. When you stop rushing to impress, your voice becomes steadier. People listen differently when you believe you deserve to be understood. That conversation ended calmly. No conflict. No drama. Just clarity. And as I walked away, I realized something powerful. English was no longer the obstacle. My relationship with myself had been. In my marriage, the change was even clearer. We spoke less about surviving this journey and more about shaping it. Survival mode narrows vision. Creation mode expands it. Independence is not just individual, it is relational. Two people choosing growth together, without control, without fear. That week, we talked about future routines, not future fears. About values, not just logistics. The tone shifted. When both people feel autonomous, connection deepens instead of weakens. This is a lesson many people misunderstand about independence. They think it leads to distance. In reality, healthy independence reduces resentment. When you choose freely, you love more cleanly. English became part of that freedom, not as a goal, but as a tool. I stopped asking, is my English good enough? I started asking, did I say what I meant? That shift matters. From a psychological perspective, this is called internal locus of control, the belief that your actions shape outcomes more than external judgments. Cultures like the United States reinforce this mindset early. You are expected to take initiative, speak up, and accept imperfection as part of growth. This week, I finally felt aligned with that cultural rhythm. Not because I became American, but because I trusted myself. There was a moment, small, almost forgettable, when I realized how far I had come. I was listening to a conversation around me, not translating word by word, but understanding meaning, tone, intention, emotion. This is called pragmatic competence. It develops later than grammar, but it is the true sign of integration. I smiled quietly. Not with pride. With relief. The journey had stopped. Feeling like a test. Freedom, I learned, is not about being fearless. It is about being willing. Willing to speak when unsure. Willing to stay when it's easier to leave. Willing to define your life without waiting for permission. This is why Americans value independence. Not because it is easy, but because it builds people who can carry themselves through uncertainty. As this week ended, I wrote something down for myself. I am not chasing freedom. I am practicing it. If you are listening to this story while learning English, while rebuilding your confidence, while navigating marriage, work, or identity in a new environment, remember this. You do not need to be brave all the time. You need to choose again. Choose to speak. Choose to stay curious. Choose to respect your own pace. Choose freedom, not as rebellion, but as responsibility. In the next and final section, I will share what this 8-week journey truly taught me, and why freedom, once chosen, quietly changes everything. Freedom, after the story ends. When this journey began 8 weeks ago, I thought freedom would feel loud. I imagined confidence as something bold, visible, maybe even dramatic. I believed independence would arrive like a moment, clear, certain, impossible to miss. It did not. Freedom arrived quietly. And it stayed quietly. By the final week, nothing extraordinary happened on the surface. No celebration. No sudden mastery of English. No perfect resolution in life or marriage. But inside, something had settled. And that mattered more than any visible success. This was the week I stopped measuring myself. Not because measurement is wrong, but because I finally understood what matters. I stopped counting mistakes. I stopped tracking vocabulary growth. I stopped asking how close I was to some invisible standard. Instead, I listened to myself, to others, to the rhythm of my days. Listening is an advanced form of confidence. When you no longer need to prove, you can finally hear. English had become part of my life, not the center of it. I spoke when I needed to. I stayed silent when silence was right. I no longer treated every conversation as practice. Some conversations were just human. That is when language truly belongs to you. Linguists describe this stage as functional fluency. It does not mean you are perfect. It means you can live. You can express needs. You can navigate emotion. You can repair misunderstandings. You are no longer trapped inside your head. This week, I realized that freedom is not about doing more. It is about carrying less. Less fear of judgment. Less urgency to impress. Less comparison with others. In my marriage, the same truth appeared. We were no longer talking about the journey as something temporary to get through. It had become part of who we are. Challenges did not disappear, but they stopped threatening our foundation. We trusted our ability to adapt. That trust is freedom. Psychologically, trust in yourself reduces stress more than external stability ever can. When you believe you can respond, uncertainty loses its power. This is why independence is so deeply valued in American culture. It trains resilience. It prepares people not for comfort, but for change. I finally understood that independence is not isolation. It is self-leadership. You do not wait to be told what to do. You do not wait to be saved. You do not wait until you feel ready. You act with what you have. This week, I reflected on the moments that once scared me. Speaking with an accent, pausing mid-sentence, asking for clarification, expressing emotion imperfectly. None of those moments harmed me. In fact, they shaped me. Mistakes were not the enemy. Avoidance was. That is the quiet truth behind freedom. The opposite of freedom is not failure. It is withdrawal. If you are learning English, if you are rebuilding confidence, if you are navigating a new country or a new chapter in your life, do not ask whether you are brave enough to be free. Ask whether you are willing to stay present. Freedom is not the absence of fear. It is the decision not to let fear choose for you. By the end of this story, I did not feel finished. I felt grounded. And grounding is more useful than closure. Life does not offer clean endings. It offers continuity. That is why this is not really the end of the story. It is the point where the story becomes yours. You may not live in the United States. You may not be married. You may not be learning English the same way I am. But the pattern is the same everywhere. You leave something familiar. You lose confidence. You rebuild slowly. You question yourself. You choose again. That cycle does not mean you are weak. It means you are alive. If Americans love independence, it is because independence teaches them how to stand without guarantees, how to speak without permission, how to move forward without certainty. And now, after these 8 weeks, I understand something clearly. Freedom is not something you achieve and keep. It is something you practice and protect. Protect it from fear. Protect it from comparison. Protect it from the urge to disappear when things get hard. If this story helped you listen more carefully, speak more honestly, or trust yourself even a little more, then it has done its job. Take what you need from it. Leave the rest. And when you close this video, remember, you do not need to become someone else to be free. You only need to stop abandoning yourself. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for walking this journey with me. And most of all, thank you for choosing to keep going. There is one truth I only understood after 8 weeks of living, loving, struggling, learning English, and rebuilding my life in the United States. Americans don't love freedom because they are fearless. They love independence because they learned how not to abandon themselves, even when life is uncomfortable. Freedom is not speaking perfect English. It is not being confident all the time. It is not having everything figured out. Freedom is speaking even when your voice shakes. It is loving even when you might lose. It is staying present instead of disappearing when life becomes hard. If you are learning English and feel slow. If you are in a marriage that tests your patience. If you are living far from home and quietly asking yourself, am I strong enough for this life? Then the real question is not, are you good enough? The real question is, are you brave enough to be free in your own way? This channel is not here to teach you how to become American. It is here to help you practice real English slowly and naturally. Through real-life stories. So you can live more honestly, wherever you are. If you want more stories like this. About life in America. About cultural differences. About love, marriage and family. And about learning English without pressure, without pretending, and without giving up. Subscribe to this channel now. Turn on notifications, so you don't miss the next story. Leave a comment and tell me, what kind of freedom are you searching for right now? Because this story is not over. It is only beginning. That's all for today. I will make many more videos like this in the future. Please subscribe to watch them.